All right, hey everyone. Instead of doing the normal onboarding breakdowns I do or kind of product highlights, I'm going to go through a couple of how-tos that I did for myself when I was working on some job hunting. I got real tired of writing resumes and cover letters. Actually, my default is tired of writing resumes and cover letters. I hate the process. I think hiring is broken. But I did two things. I used Notebook LM and I used GPT, and a custom GPT specifically. So what I want to do is show you the custom GPT I set up. And then since some of you probably haven't built one yet, I want to show you what that process looks like. So first we'll just look at this one. So I gave it my resume, I exported my LinkedIn profile, I gave it a list of recommendations that I have, cover letters I've written, a number of things that kind of tell my story. I need to go and just do a whisper or a transcript of me talking through some of it, but I've also had it ask me questions about different roles and then save some of that information too. So the way that I use this is if I see a role I like, I'll read it, go through it, I'll ask it to be critical and look at the job description and tell me whether or not I'm a compelling fit, just to help me determine if it's worth my time. And then I'll have it help me write out cover letters if I want to go that route. Or in some cases, I will just send the link to the GPT to the hiring team, just because I feel like it's a better experience for them. So you can see I gave it some starting points for conversation starters. So you can do things like this, and hopefully it pulls accurately. So it's going to pull from, this is going to give a whole list in chronological order in this case. Kind of does it differently. It's just going to pick probably 10 or something. I've got a bunch of them. I was going to keep going. So this summarizes them. You could also say, so you can ask it more specific things and dig into it. It can quote and reference those things. You can ask about experience. So I'm going to go in and show you how I set it up. I probably have some cleanup to do. So you have your instructions, and I'll show you how it writes the instructions for you. And I kind of have I don't love that actually that it does that. I usually end up rewriting the prompt, but I haven't gone back to do that yet. It has the files that I've given it, resumes, recommendations, things I already told you about. You kind of get a name or whatever. When you go to create them, it's a chat interface, which I'll show you in a minute. So you can choose what features it has. You can create new actions and things like that too, which are just kind of like pre-planned tasks that you can give it. So the way you can do this is if you go to, you have to be on the paid plan. You go to GPTs, you go to create. So you get this interface. Usually it starts you here. And it's going to ask you what kind of GPT you want to make. And you just come up with whatever you want it to do. And so it'll give you this gear icon. Now, what we don't know is if that gear icon is strictly it taking my direction and starting to write the prompt or the instructions on the other end, or if it's doing something that's not necessarily exposed on the front end. So I've played around with sometimes doing this and sometimes writing the prompt from scratch, and I do think it does some things when you have this conversation with it that it doesn't necessarily expose on the other side. So sometimes I'll do both. Whoops, my chat. This is a preview over here. So it's going to go through this. It'll always ask you for a name. It'll try to come up with an icon so it has an image, and then you'll have a conversation. And the conversation can go as long as you want or as short as you want. And you can also give it files in this interface too. So it'll collect all this stuff from you and then create this GPT that you can test on the right, and then you can give feedback to kind of get to the point that you want it to be so it's functional. And then I always go through and check the configuration side and edit the prompt myself, or make sure there's enough direction or specificity and things like that, and then I iterate on it to get it better over time. So to come up with like I showed you before, your career helper is what I called mine. It's really just giving it the context and then giving it the direction. So I had to tell mine not to be overly optimistic, to be pretty critical. I had mine interview me for a while and ask like really hard questions to get a better sense of my background and skills and evaluate it. So it has a good sense. And like I said, those don't always show up in the prompt. It's kind of like the memory function that exists on GPT. So I don't know for sure how that works, but I do ask it to remember those things, and it does change the output. So it's worth keeping that in mind when you put this together.